You're in bed, you open your phone, and there it is. Someone you went to school with just bought a house. Someone your age got the title you've chased for years. Your stomach drops and you start doing the math. How old you are, where you thought you'd be, how far apart those numbers have drifted. Almost 2,000 years ago, a man sat alone at night writing notes to himself, and he kept circling back to this exact feeling. He knew what it was to measure yourself against everyone and come up short. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and here's the first thing he'd hand you, before any theory, the thing you actually came here for. You only ever get to stand in one place, today. The version of you that fell behind is already in the past, and the past is gone. You can't be it anymore. The version of you that's supposed to be further along lives on a calendar in your head that hasn't happened yet, and might never. Feeling behind needs both of those people to be real, and neither one is. There's no schedule nailed to the sky. There's just you, tonight, holding your actual life up against a finish line you drew yourself, in your own handwriting. That alone, if you let it land, takes some of the weight off your chest right now, before we go a single step further. In the next half hour, 3 things. Why this grabs you so hard at this age, why the screen in your hand makes it far worse, and one small thing you can do tonight, the same thing he did, to get out from under it. Because once you really see what I just said, here's where it lands, and it's the spine of the whole video. The race you think you're losing was never a real race to begin with. Think about where the schedule even came from. By 25, you were supposed to have the career figured out. By 28, the relationship. By 30, the apartment, the savings, the thing you can point to when someone asks how you're doing. Nobody handed you that timetable in writing. Nobody made you sign it. But somewhere along the way, you picked it up, you printed it in your own head, and now you fail yourself against it every single night before you fall asleep. Marcus saw this trap from the inside. He was a Roman emperor, the most powerful man alive, and the journal we now call his Meditations is full of him dragging his own attention back out of the past and the future and into the only place a life is ever actually lived, the present moment right in front of him. He wasn't being poetic about it. He understood something blunt and practical. The second you start living in a future that hasn't arrived, you've handed your piece to a thing that doesn't exist yet, and it will bleed you dry every night you let it. And notice how the story works on you. You're 26, you're stable enough, you're fine, and then you do the math. You think, my parents had a house by now. You think, that guy from my year already runs his own thing. And suddenly, a perfectly okay Tuesday turns into evidence that your whole life is off track. Nothing in your real day changed. You didn't lose anything in the last 10 seconds. You just compared the actual moment you're living in against an imaginary moment on a schedule you made up, and the imaginary one won. Picture the track you think you're on. There's no schedule posted anywhere on it. You printed it, you taped it to the wall yourself, and then you started punishing yourself for falling behind a deadline that exists nowhere but inside your own head. And here's the cruelest trick that schedule plays on you. Even on the rare night you actually hit one of its deadlines, it doesn't stop and tell you well done. It just quietly slides the line further out. You get the job, and within a week, the new measure is the better job. You finally move out, and now it's owning instead of renting. You hit the salary number you swore would make you feel like you'd made it, and the number that would make you feel like you'd made it is suddenly higher. That's the proof it was never a real finish line. A real finish line lets you stop running. This one was built so you never can. You could win every single deadline on that schedule and still lie awake feeling behind. Because behind was never really about your life at all. It was about the gap. And the schedule was designed so the gap never ever closes. So let me ask you something, and don't answer it lazily. The age you were supposed to have it all figured out by, who gave you that number? Picture the deadline you think you missed. By 30, you were supposed to have done what exactly? And did you ever actually agree to that date? Or did you just absorb it from people who were every bit as scared as you are right now? That's only half of why you feel the way you do. The other half is darker, because it's about the other runners, the ones you keep glancing at, and how little of them you can actually see. Marcus had an idea that sounds strange at first, and then never leaves you once it lands. You can never, ever see inside another person. You can't see their mind, the part that's actually thinking and doubting and afraid. All you get is the outside, the performance, the face they decided to put on that morning. He was surrounded by senators and generals who looked completely composed, completely ahead of him, and he had to keep reminding himself that behind every one of those calm faces was a person churning with the same fear and pettiness and confusion as everyone else. The outside is a mask, it always was. Even in a world with no phones, you only ever got the mask. Now take that idea and drop it into the world you actually live in, because you don't even get the calm face anymore. You get something far more filtered than that. You get the 3 seconds they chose to post. The keys held up to the camera, the ring, the new office on day one, the view from the trip. You never see the debt sitting behind the apartment. You never see the fight the night before the engagement photo. You never see them lying awake at 3 a.m. feeling exactly as behind as you do right now, because nobody films that part. Nobody captions a photo, here's me doubting everything. I'll be honest with you, I spent an entire year of my 20s absolutely certain that everyone I knew had it figured out except me. Every single person. And it took me way too long to realize what I was actually doing. I was comparing the full, unedited footage of my own life. Every dull morning, every doubt, every retake against everyone else's highlight reel, against the trailer. Of course, I came out feeling like I was losing. The comparison was rigged before it even started. Think about how a feed actually works on you. You open it tired, you're already a little low, and it feeds you, one after another, the single best moment from 1,000 different lives. One person's wedding, one person's promotion, one person's new car, one person's beach. You scroll for 10 minutes and you've just watched the greatest hits of a few hundred people stitched into one impossible reel. And then some quiet part of you goes, why is my one life not all of that at once? But nobody's life is all of that at once. You're holding yourself to the combined highlights of an entire crowd. This is the part that's almost cruel about it. On the track, you can watch the other runners cross their finish lines, because that's the only thing the screen will show you. You see them cross and cross and cross all day long, but you never see them stop. You never see them double over and quit. You never see them start the whole thing over again, slower, in a lane you can't even see. So you build this monster in your head, this person who is winning at everything, and the person doesn't exist. You assembled him out of fragments that everyone, including you, only chose to show because they made them look good. So here's the question I want you to actually sit with. Think of the one person whose life makes you feel the most behind. Have them in your mind. Now ask yourself, honestly, how much of their real day, the boring parts, the scared parts, the parts they'd never post, have you ever once seen? Or did you build that entire person out of the handful of wins they decided to put online? And if you've ever gotten close to one of those people, really close, you already know how this ends. You sit down with a friend whose life looked, from the outside, like it was 3 steps ahead of yours. The job, the relationship, the whole package. And at some point, a few drinks in or just in a quiet, honest moment, they tell you they feel like a fraud, that they're exhausted, that they look at someone else and feel behind, every single time. The composed ones, the ones who look like they cracked the code, are running the same loop in their own heads, just pointed at a different target. Marcus knew that 2,000 years ago from the inside, because he was the guy everyone else was measuring themselves against, and he still woke up having to talk himself down. The view you have of other people's lives is a lie of omission, and the only person whose full footage you'll ever see is you. So of course you compare. You're holding the only complete file in the room. But here's where it goes deeper, because even if you could somehow see into every lane perfectly, even if every post came with the full unfiltered truth attached, there'd still be a problem underneath all of this. And it's the one Marcus would put his finger on the hardest. He split the whole world into 2 columns, and he treated that split as the most important thing a person could ever learn. In one column, the things that are actually up to you, your choices, your effort, how you treat people, what you do with the hours in front of you today. And in the other column, everything else. Whether the effort pays off, the timing, the luck, the economy, who happens to get the house first, other people's opinions of you. He said almost all of our suffering comes from getting these two columns confused, from pouring our whole heart into the second one, the one we can't move, while ignoring the first, the only one we can. Now look at where being behind actually lives. Look at what you're using to measure it. The title, the salary, the house, the relationship status, the way your life ranks against everyone else's. Every single one of those things sits in the second column. The column you do not control. You feel behind because you've decided to score your entire worth using the one set of things you were never holding the wheel on in the first place. The outcomes, the timing, the applause. And meanwhile, the one thing that is genuinely, completely yours, what you actually did with today, you barely give yourself any credit for at all. Picture two people who put in the exact same work, same hours, same care, same honest effort. One of them happens to land in the right place at the right moment and gets the win. The other hits a bad year, a bad market, a run of plain bad luck, and gets nothing visible to show for it. If you measure those two people by the scoreboard, by the outcome alone, one's a winner and one's a failure. But that's insane because they did the same thing. The only honest way to measure a life, Marcus would say, is by the part you actually controlled. The effort, the showing up, not where it happened to land you on a list. And this is exactly why the feed does so much damage. It only ever shows you outcomes. It never shows you effort. You can't post effort. You can't film the 4 years of quiet, unglamorous work behind someone's overnight win, so the feed skips it entirely and shows you only the trophy at the end. So you sit there comparing your daily effort, which you can feel, against everyone else's outcomes, which is all you can see. It's the most unfair scoreboard ever built, and you check it 40 times a day. You keep your eyes locked on the leaderboard, which you don't control, instead of on your own stride, which you completely do. That's the whole trap. That's the engine of the feeling. So answer me this one carefully. What did you actually do today that was fully up to you? Not the result, just the doing. The work you put in, the way you showed up, the thing you didn't give up on. And when was the last time you gave yourself a single ounce of credit for that, instead of only for where it ranked you against everyone else? Now here's a turn that goes one level beyond even that, because you're not just racing for the wrong things. There's a decent chance you're not even running the same race as the people you're comparing yourself to. Marcus loved to point at nature for this. He'd say, look, the fig tree does the work of a fig tree. The vine bears grapes, the horse runs, the bee makes honey, and not one of them wastes a second wishing it were doing some other creature's job. Each thing has its own nature, its own work, its own season to ripen in. A fig isn't behind a grape. They're not in competition. They're just two completely different things, each becoming what it actually is on its own clock. You, though, you're an olive tree staring at a vine in the next field, panicking because you don't have any grapes yet. But you were never going to grow grapes. That was never your work. The person you're measuring yourself against might be running an entirely different course, with different routes, different soil, a different reason for being here altogether, and you've quietly decided that their finish line is the one you're supposed to reach too. So you feel behind on a race you were never actually entered in. Think about how specific this gets in real life. You watch a friend climb fast in a career that, if you're honest, you don't even want. You feel behind anyway. You see someone settle down young and you feel like you're lagging, even though when you picture that life for yourself this year, it makes your chest tighten, not open up. That's the tell. That's how you know you've borrowed someone else's course. You feel behind toward a destination you don't even want to arrive at. Marcus would say that's not ambition, that's just forgetting what your own nature is for. And there's a strange relief buried in this. If you're running your own course, the whole idea of ahead and behind dissolves because there's no one to be ahead or behind of. The fig ripens when the fig ripens. Rushing it doesn't make it sweeter, it just makes it bitter and early. Your only real job, the only one nature actually assigned you, is to become the fullest version of your own thing, in your own season, not to beat a vine at growing grapes. And think about how different those seasons really are. Some figs ripen in a few weeks. Some trees don't bear a thing for years, and nobody stands in the orchard calling them failures for it. Because everyone understands that's just how those trees work. People are exactly the same and we forget it constantly. There are lives that come together fast and early and then flatten out. There are lives where it looks like nothing is happening for a decade, and then everything that was quietly building underground comes up all at once. Half the people you'd actually call wise or deep or good at what they do did not look impressive at all at your age. Their roots were still going down where no one could see. You're watching the fast trees fruit and concluding you're broken, when there's a real chance you're just one of the slower ones, the kind that takes longer and lasts. So sit with this one honestly. The milestone you feel most behind on right now, is it actually yours? Or did you pick it up off someone else's timeline because they made it look good? If no one could see whether you ever reached it, would you still want it as badly? And here's the last turn. It sounds heavy at first, but it's the one that actually sets you free. Marcus thought about death constantly. Not in a morbid way, not to sink himself into gloom, but as a kind of medicine, a way to get his sense of scale back whenever it slipped. And here's the thing he kept reminding himself. Everyone in this race ends up in exactly the same place. The ones who are ahead, the ones who are behind, the emperors and the people the emperors envied, every single one of them crosses the same final line and turns into the same dust. He'd zoom way out in his mind, picture himself looking down from a great height, and from up there, the whole frantic anthill, all the rushing and ranking and winning and losing, blurs into one moving smudge of people who all end the same way. I know how that can sound. It can sound like nothing matters. But that's not what he meant, and it's not what it does. It doesn't make your life meaningless. It makes the ranking meaningless, and those are completely different things. Because the ranking was the part torturing you, the ranking was the whole problem. Everyone you're envying right now, every winner whose life is making you feel small tonight, joins the exact same ground as everyone Marcus himself once envied. And every one of those people he lost sleep over, the ones who seemed so far ahead of him, is now equally forgotten, equally dust. The gap between them and everyone else closed completely and permanently. He even reminded himself that the great emperors before him, the ones the whole world feared and admired, were already gone and half remembered. If that was true for them, with their statues and their conquests, then the fact that your old classmate got promoted before you did is not the cosmic emergency your nervous system keeps insisting it is at midnight. Pull the camera back far enough, and the entire scoreboard you're bleeding over fits on the head of a pin. And you don't even need 2,000 years to feel it. Think about who the most envied person in your own little world was 5 years ago. The one everyone wanted to be, the one whose life made you feel small back then. Now ask yourself how much you actually think about them today. Half the people you'd have traded places with 3 years ago, you couldn't even tell me where they are now. The win that was eating you alive at 22 is a fact you can barely remember at 27. That's not sad, that's the whole point. If the rankings that wrecked you in the past have already dissolved into nothing, then the one wrecking you tonight is going to do the exact same thing. The you of 5 years from now will look back at this specific comparison, the one keeping you up right now, and struggle to remember why it ever felt like the end of the world. So picture the finish line you're sprinting toward in a panic. Here's the truth about it. It's the same line for everyone. And on the other side of it, there's no scoreboard. Nobody's keeping score past the finish. Which means the only thing that was ever actually real, the only thing that was ever yours, was the running itself. The day. This day. The one you keep skipping past because you're too busy checking how far behind you are to actually live in it. If you knew for a fact that the ranking gets wiped completely clean at the end, that nobody keeps the score, what's one thing you'd stop racing for tomorrow morning? And what's one thing you'd finally let yourself do slowly, on purpose, without once glancing at the clock? So let's name the real thing here, because it was never what you thought it was. The problem was never that you're slow. The problem is that you handed the scoring of your entire life over to a race you never agreed to enter. Run on a track that doesn't exist. Measured by a scoreboard you can't control. Against runners you can't actually see. On a course that might not even be yours. And the whole thing gets wiped clean at the end anyway. No wonder you feel behind. You've been failing a rigged test in a subject you never signed up for, graded by people who are just as lost as you are. And the strangest part is how much it quietly eats. Every hour you spend feeling behind is an hour pulled straight out of the only life you actually get. You're not really living the day. You're standing slightly outside of it, refereeing it, scoring it against a phantom, and the day slips past ungraded and unlived while you do it. That's the real cost. Not that you lose the race, there is no race. It's that you keep trading the actual hours of your one life for the feeling of losing an imaginary one. So before we get to what you do about it, sit with one more question. How many of your evenings lately have gone exactly like that? Present in body, somewhere else entirely in your head, too busy measuring your life to actually be inside it? Here's how Marcus actually got out from under it. He didn't beat this feeling by winning the race. A man who was already the most powerful person on earth had nothing left to win, and he still felt the pull of it, which is exactly why he had to fight it on paper, night after night. He beat it by stepping off the track every evening and asking himself a different question. And you can do the exact same thing, starting tonight, with nothing but your own attention and a couple of minutes before bed. 3 small things. This is the whole protocol. First, the question. Every night before sleep, the same one Marcus essentially put to himself in that journal. Not where did I rank today, not who got ahead of me. Just this. What did I do today that was actually up to me, and did I do it well? That single question drags your eyes off the leaderboard and back onto your own stride, where they belong. Second, the warning sign so you can catch the pattern the moment it starts instead of an hour into the spiral. It's that exact instant. You open a feed, your chest goes tight, and the word behind lights up somewhere in the back of your head. The second you feel that, name it. Say it to yourself, out loud if you have to. That's the race talking, not the truth. The tightness in your chest is the trap snapping shut again. Just naming it for what it is loosens its grip. And third, the micro action, the thing that actually breaks it right there in the moment. When that comparison hits, before you scroll on, before you let it pull you under, name one concrete thing you did today that was in your control. Just one. The effort, never the outcome. The work, not the win. You're trading the scoreboard for the stride in real time with your own hands. That's all Marcus ever did. A man with an entire empire on his shoulders, sitting with a journal by candlelight, pulling his attention back one night at a time, off the things he couldn't hold and onto the one thing he could. You're not behind. There was never a line to be behind. There's only this day, the part of it that's actually yours and what you decide to do with it. Everyone else is running a race that ends exactly where yours does, on a clock none of you control. So you can keep sprinting with your head turned sideways, watching everyone else tripping over your own feet, arriving nowhere out of breath. Or you can look down at the only ground that was ever really under you, the ground right here, and take the next step like it's the only one that exists. Because when you stop lying to yourself about the race, it is.